likely exceed judges' authority. The plaintiffs, 19 states, the District of Columbia, and two nonprofit organizations are arguing that the court's sweeping injunction was the correct ruling because it provides complete relief. The Supreme Court had ruled that the injunction should be overturned if it is broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff with standing to sue. The government says the plaintiffs are missing the point of the Supreme Court's ruling, which is that a judge's ruling can benefit only the plaintiffs named in the lawsuit. The judge has taken the new arguments under advisement. Joining us now to discuss District Judge Leo Sorokin's decision on birthright citizenship is legal analyst Bobby Ann Cox, civil rights attorney and fellow, Brownstone Institute. Also joining us is civil and criminal defense attorney Dante Mills. He's the lead attorney and managing partner at Mills Legal. So first of all, good afternoon to you both. Again, thanks for joining us this week. Dante, I'll start with you. Do you think it is likely, or what are the implications if Judge Sorokin decides to uphold his nationwide injunction despite the Supreme Court's recent ruling?
Well, this is going to put the Supreme Court's recent ruling to the test. They left it out. And most times in law, there are some exceptions that are built in. And the exception that the Supreme Court left here was for complete relief, was the phrase they used. So what this judge is going to have to decide is, do these states, because at this point there's about 19 different attorney generals from different states that's going to petition or join in with this petition for this judge and say that our citizens can be impacted as well. And if one state or one district decides that birthright citizenship is permissible or should remain permissible, then the government can go to just another jurisdiction and try to get relief. So the only way to get complete relief is if the decision impacts the entire nation. That's what the movements are arguing here, that the only way to make sure that these citizens, as they are now, don't lose their citizenship is if this ruling affects everybody or everywhere, every jurisdiction in the country. So the judge is going to have to decide if that's necessary or if it should be limited to one jurisdiction and one plaintiff alone. And then I think either way, the Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in to give explanation to what complete relief should and actually does mean.
Okay, Bobby Ann, what are your thoughts? Is it likely? How might Judge Sorokin justify maintaining nationwide block?
So I think here there is a really big problem with standing. If you look at who is bringing this lawsuit, as Dante mentioned, it's 19 attorneys general. So it's states, actual states are suing over President Trump's executive order regarding birthright citizenship. And technically, the states don't have standing to bring that argument. This is not a situation where the federal government is infringing on states' rights. The states don't have the right to determine citizenship or not. That is a federal question that is very specific in our federal constitution. So I think there is a tremendous problem here with standing in that the states don't have the right or have the ability to bring this kind of a lawsuit against the Trump administration. So I think that that is something that is going to have to play out in the higher courts, because obviously this specific trial court judge is not paying any attention to that very glaring fact.
Okay, Dante, do you have a response to that?
Well, Bobby Ann is right. Yeah, I think Bobby Ann is right. Absolutely. That there's a question about whether or not the states have the right, but there is an argument that the states do have a right to stand on behalf of their citizens. And that's what they're doing now. They're saying these people are citizens of our states and we're acting on their behalf, and we have the right to act on behalf of our citizens because we essentially represent them. The court is going to have to decide that, because I think there's a nuance there, whether or not they're challenging if birthright citizenship is appropriate. That's a secondary question. But if we're talking about standing, I think there is an argument to be made that the states can represent their own citizens and speak on behalf or bring cases on their behalf.
Okay, Bobby Ann, on birthright citizenship itself, in his ruling in February, Judge Sorokin said that the Constitution confers birthright citizenship broadly. including persons within the categories described in the executive order, of course, referring to Trump's order. So does the 14th Amendment and the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof include children to undocumented immigrants, in your view?
No, it would not. I mean, we have to look at what the founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, were looking at. What was the situation at that day and that time, and what did they mean when they created this provision in our Constitution? It's ludicrous to think that they envisioned that people would sneak into our country or openly come into our country illegally, breaking our laws to get here. And then give birth to a child and then have the right for that child to become a citizen of our country. Or alternatively, that somebody would be here vacationing temporarily or here on a temporary visa, perhaps a student visa or something like that, give birth to a child, and then that child automatically is a citizen of this country. I mean, it's just a ridiculous, position to take from a legal standpoint. Subject to the jurisdiction of our country means you live here, you are a citizen, or you are legally here. You are a permanent legal resident, you have a green card, and you're allowed to be in this country, and you have children. Yes, your children are citizens, but not if you came here illegally or if you're here very temporarily. It's not what the founding fathers envisioned.
Dante, what is your expert analysis on the ruling?
I disagree with that, and we can look at it in different ways. If we talk about the intent of the founding fathers, listen, they stated clearly: "Bring me, you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry." They weren't in a position or have the belief that we should be trying to keep people out. That's just not who they were, because our founding fathers came here seeking that same kind of relief. So I doubt that they would take that position that we're better than someone else, and unless you meet these specific qualifications. If they wanted those qualifications to be in there, they could have, which in fact they did, amend or put language in there that makes a distinction. They didn't. They said subject to the jurisdiction. Everybody within our country is subject to the laws of our country. Whether you're here legally or not, if you break a law, you have to face trial or court or charges in our jurisdiction. So you are subject to the jurisdiction. How can we say that an illegal immigrant is here and charge them with the crime and say you have to show up to court? But then when it comes to them falling within our jurisdiction for birthright citizenship or something positive, say, oh, but it doesn't count for that. We don't have jurisdiction over you, or you aren't within our jurisdiction there. I think the language is plain. We can try to parse it out or make some kind of excuse if we want to take the stance that it should be harder to become a citizen. But the founding fathers made it clear. The language is clear. And I think we have to leave it there unless there's an amendment to the Constitution.
But Dante, you don't think the original meaning of the 14th Amendment refers to the full political allegiance of an individual and the jurisdiction of a foreign government has over that individual?
So that's one of the qualifications. We're not talking here. That order doesn't address people who aren't in allegiance to the United States. That order says that courts or the country should not validate the citizenship of people whose parents are not citizens, that were born here. That has nothing to do with the allegiance to the country. So if you want to make that separate distinction, if someone is determined to be a traitor to the nation or show some kind of non-allegiance to our country or some kind of threat to our country, there are procedures in place to remove those people. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, and that order specifically refers to individuals who were born here, who simply their parents are not citizens. There is no carve out in the amendment for that. There could have been if the founding fathers intended for that to be the case.
Okay, Bobby Ann, what do you say to the Supreme Court's 1898 ruling in United States v. Wong Kim Ark, in which it interpreted the 14th Amendment as recognizing the right to birthright citizenship regardless of the status of immigration of a baby's parents?
Yeah, well, the decision, you have to look at every decision as a snapshot in time. You have to look at every decision as what were the actual facts surrounding that decision, because it's very rare that facts are always the same when it goes from one plaintiff to another plaintiff or to a case in general. I do want to just say, to Dante's point, if the founding fathers wanted everybody that is born in this country, even if they're born to a tourist, even if they're born to a student who's here on a visa for short-term period, even if they're born to someone who snuck across our border and came in here illegally, then they would have made the language clear. They would have said every person in the United States of America who has a child, that child is now a citizen. But that's not what they said. They picked their language very carefully, and they said, subject to the jurisdiction. So if you're from a foreign country and you come here illegally, or you're here as a tourist, you live in a different country, you're a citizen of a different country, you're subject to your country's purview. And just because you're in our country as a tourist or as a temporary student or as an illegal immigrant, that doesn't mean that your child automatically gets citizenship. So we do have a difference of opinion on what that means.
Okay, Dante, just one more thought from you, and then I want to change gears a little bit.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll bounce back because I think this is a good conversation. But what's the response to the fact that our courts have jurisdiction over people who are here, whether they are here legally or not? We have jurisdiction to bring charges against people, to summon them to court. They are subject to our jurisdiction. So what's different, or what distinction is there that then in this particular case they wouldn't be?
Okay, I want to change gears now. Another issue I would like your guys' comments on is that the Trump administration asked an appeals court on July 14th to allow immigration operations to resume in Southern California. And that's after District Judge Frimpong issued a temporary restraining order last Friday. So Bobby Ann, the judge found that DHS was allegedly targeting individuals based on characteristics such as how they look. So my question to you is, how does the Fourth Amendment apply to immigration enforcement actions? To what extent can factors like, race, language, other things be used as part of establishing reasonable suspicion?
Right. Well, that's just an argument and a practice of, being a demagogue. Okay. The federal government, the ICE agents, from what I've read and from what I'm hearing in news reports, are targeting individuals who are not just here illegally, right? They didn't just come across the border illegally and broke a law doing that, but they're targeting criminals, hard criminals that are committing crimes. Either once they get into our country, they've committed further crimes, or they committed crimes in their country and they have a rap sheet in their country. And so they are targeting these people, and for the plaintiffs in this case, and then the judge to basically take their language and regurgitate it in the decision, it's really just trying to tug at the heartstrings because what's actually happening is they're not just going around, the ICE agents aren't just going around picking anybody willy-nilly off the street. They're doing their homework, they're doing their research. And this is a very serious situation. I mean, these ICE agents are putting their lives on the line. Many have been attacked, many have been harmed, and it's absolutely ridiculous. They're doing their job, they're enforcing the law. And if there's pushback, it's completely inappropriate and it's against the law. So I think it's really just, they're blowing smoke to hide the facts and twisting the truth to hide the facts. That's not exactly what's going on.
Okay, Dante, the Trump administration argues that that judge overstepped her authority by interfering in federal immigration enforcement.
That judge is the right thing. And I'll start by saying I'm a proponent. I'm in favor of border control. We needed control of our borders. I think that's happening. I think it's a good thing. But I also think that we have to remember that we're dealing with people, right? And not just what we have is a situation, and this wasn't something just made up. There was evidence that this judge pointed out, specifically people in the Trump administration who said what their standards were, what criteria they were using. And they used things like, if you had an accent, they decided that that was probable cause. That's just wrong. You can't target people that way. We have protections in place. Everyone should be treated fairly. There is no question. If you've done your homework as an agent, you've got some kind of tip, or there's some kind of information that you have that will lead you to believe that there are undocumented people or people who should not be here, do what you need to do. But that's not what's happening all over this country. They are going to places that they think Hispanic people are. Let's just be honest. They're not targeting Russian immigrants or people from other countries in Europe. What they're doing is going places where they believe Hispanic people are, and they say, you have an accent, you speak Spanish, I'm going to detain you and figure out who you are and if you should be here or not. That's just not how we should operate, because again, we're dealing with human lives here, and we should not take that stance of having that prejudice and having that value where we look at people and say, you are more likely to be a problem than someone else, because that's what's happening. And I'm glad the judge called them out and put in that order specifically the words of the Trump administration that was outlining the criteria they were using.
Okay, Bobby Ann, did the judge act within her legal boundaries?
No, absolutely not. And this is just ridiculous. Judges are not allowed to set policy. Okay, judges don't set domestic policy. Judges don't set foreign policy. That is not the judge. That is not the purview of a judge. It is not within the constitutional command of a judge. We have separation of powers in our Constitution for a reason, so that one branch of government does not become too powerful. And in this case, and in many cases that we've seen as of late, the federal judges are giving themselves powers that they do not have. So judges can't say whether or not a policy of the federal government, the executive branch, is good or bad. That is not their job, and it is not a power that they have. So in this case, yet again, we see another federal judge thinking that they know better than a policy of the administration and the executive branch, and they're imposing their own will. It's completely, it's completely a judicial overreach at its best. Not to mention
I think
the
that
other
is the
fact that
court's
it's in
job.
violation. It is not the court's job. They don't set policy. Policy is made by the executive. I mean, so the president is supposed to just sit there and look pretty in the Oval Office. I mean, according to these judges, the president has no powers at all. They're trying to curb everything that's being done, including enforcing our immigration laws. So the judges completely overstepped here.
Okay.
Yeah, what the court is doing is saying our job, your job, executive branch, is to set the policy. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think part of this immigration policy is good and beneficial for this country, but you can't use discriminatory practices. And that is the job of the judicial branch, to say this law has been created. Our job is to make sure it doesn't violate the Constitution. And when you have a policy that's happening where people say, I'm going to violate your rights and discriminate against you because you have an accent or because you speak Spanish, then it is the judicial branch's job to say that violates the Constitution. Therefore, this policy is improper and illegal, and it should not be enforced. That's what they're supposed to do.
Okay, we're running out of time here. I started with Dante, so Bobby Ann, final thoughts.
Yeah, that's not what's happening here. I mean, the head of the Department of Homeland Security is standing on, national TV, giving example after example of the people that are being detained and that they are deporting, that they are getting off our streets to make Americans safer. And these are cold, hard criminals. And if you want to hear or read some of the things that they've done, it's outrageous. It's murder, it's rape, it's assault. These things are absolutely horrendous. So, to say that the Trump administration is going around just pulling people off the street because they have an accent is not true. And we need to look at what the facts are, and we have to hear all the reports, not just the reports from one side of the story. That's just an unfair way to approach things.
All right, I'm sure we'll have similar conversations again in the future, but we'll leave it there for today. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.